Hey Exile, PoE Academy here with my End of League project. I wanted to play a skill that is barely played in the current meta, which is Lightning Tendrils. Was I able to make it work, and even more important, is it fun to play? Stick around to the end of the video to get my conclusion on the build, where it performs well and where it doesn't. And remember that you can find the POB and the shopping list in the description of the video. Defensive wise, this is not a very easy build to play, because having to stand still is very dangerous in PoE. To not die to enemies while channeling, we scale armor, and we also combine life gain on block with capped block chance. In addition to that, we also get a lot of life regen from our gear and the Inquisitor ascendancy itself. We also split damage into lightning damage and cold damage with Call of the Brotherhood to be able to chill and freeze enemies, because Lightning Tendrils hits quite hard. Offensive wise, we invest a lot into cast speed to proc the stronger pulse every 4 pulses very quickly. We also get a lot of crit to make inevitable judgment work, and we scale a lot of increased area of effect to make the skill smooth for mapping. Last but not least, we also abuse Righteous Fire for 39% more spell damage. There are no mandatory items for the build, but you want to get your hands on the Call of the Brotherhood to split your damage into cold and lightning damage for it to be able to chill and freeze the enemies, which is quite nice defensively. Demerons is a very nice item for the build as it synergizes very well with it. Since we're scaling 5 power charges anyways for crit, the item grants base crit, crit multi and additional chance to block spell damage, which is very nice. However, we must outregen 6 times 200 lightning damage per second. That still goes through lightning resistances, but adds a lot of degen on top of Righteous Fire. If you want to add substantial damage to the build, you would use a Bottled Faith Flask and also a Hunter Redeemer's Chest with Frenzy charges on hit and base spell crit damage. The helmet is fully devoted to mana reservation efficiency. You want to get one with an enchant for either Zealotry, Wrath or Determination. Also add the reservation efficiency implicit and also the suffix, which is needed to be able to squeeze in all the auras. Other than that, focus on life resistances and, very importantly, life regenerated per second. Wait, life regenerated per second? Why do you need that? We have a lot of degen coming from Righteous Fire and also the Shimmeron wand. To reach a net life regeneration, you want to have life regeneration sources basically anywhere you can get them. This includes flat life regen from rare items, passives on cluster jewels, Watcher's Eye Vitality mod, Boot Enchant, Inquisitor passive and also passive nodes in the skill tree. You can see that with all these things you can get a net life and net ES regen of roughly 500, which is quite comfortable. The build is also elemental immune. It uses the same setup as I was using in my Sweep Berserker build, which is Storm Shroud plus a Stygian Vice Abyss Jewel with chance to avoid being shocked, and boots with avoid elemental ailments and avoid being shocked implicits. You can skip this setup if you want, because Storm Shroud is quite expensive at the moment, but it really adds a lot to your defenses if you are elemental immune. Did you know that there are more Ascendancy nodes than Pious Path and Inevitable Judgment for the Inquisitor tree? Well, turns out that there is something called Instruments of Zeal, which grants Fanaticism for 4 seconds on reaching maximum Fanatic charges. Fanaticism grants spells you cast yourself 75% more cast speed, 75% reduced cost, and 75% increased area of effect, which synergizes quite well, as you can imagine, with Lightning Tendrils. And yeah, PoB confirms, if we proc Fanaticism in this build, it almost doubles the damage. Best way to proc this is to use an attack movement skill, in our case Shield Charge. The build also utilizes on a Glorious Vanity Jewel with Doyani to get the Corrupted Soul Keystone needed for the Righteous Fire setup. If you don't use this keystone, you will have a negative net energy shield regen, but a higher net life regen, which is not what we want. The build also uses 2 big cluster jewels, and the most important node on here is Snowstorm. You also want to make sure to have 1 Doyani's Lesson node and 1 Storm Rider node on either jewel. There are 4 medium cluster jewels that go into the large cluster jewels. They are your main source of AoE scaling if you use Vast Power and Towering Threat on them. Other than that and some of the block nodes, the tree is pretty generic for an Inquisitor. The build uses 2 movement skill setups. One is Shield Charge for proccing Fanaticism and applying Assassin's Mark on hit, and the other one is Lightning Warp if you want to go really fast. Stone Golem and Molten Shell on low level cast when damage taken help a lot with survivability, and Decoy Totem and Frost Shield will salve you much more often than you think they would. Might also be worthwhile to try Phantasmal Lightning Tendrils for more damage on the stronger pulses, but I haven't tried it yet. So, is it worth playing the build right now? The build performs very well in regular maps and can also do some bosses, but don't expect to clear rare invitations or even Ubers with it. Lightning Tendrils is a fun skill to play, especially if you invest into some area of effect, but even though there is such a high investment in AoE in this build, it still feels abysmal to many other meta skills like Spark, Explode BV or any of the bow skills. Its survivability is decent, but you have to get all the bits and pieces together to make it work, and even then you rely on Decoy Totem and Frost Shield to not die too often. All in all, I would say I had some fun with the build, but if you want to play something very off meta, I'd rather encourage you to check out my Sweet Berserker build, and hope that GGG buffs the skill in some form or another. I also wanted to let you know that this is likely to be my last PoE related video this league, as I wanted to continue playing Last Epoch, and let's see, maybe I will release 1 or 2 videos on this game. Now enjoy the rest of the Uber of the fight, happy hunting Exile, and see you in the next one.